The world awoke to news of U.S. naval forces establishing a security zone off Venezuela's coast, a move Washington claims is to halt illicit trafficking and stabilize a collapsing state. Yet globally, this is seen as the start of a military intervention, not a humanitarian mission. The geopolitical shockwaves are immediate. Nations from Beijing to Brussels are recalculating their positions as America once again flexes its military might in a sovereign state. The White House frames this as a responsibility to protect, but echoes of Iraq and Libya fuel skepticism. The unipolar moment is over. U.S. actions now face real global pushback, especially with Venezuela's deep ties to other powers. The Organization of American States is split, with some allies supporting the U.S., while others warn of dangerous precedents. The EU calls for restraint, and China's measured silence signals deeper strategic calculations. This is not just a regional crisis, it's a global event, already shifting the US-China rivalry. The outcome in Venezuela may determine which model of international influence prevails. The US approach in Venezuela is classic liberal interventionism, military, economic, and diplomatic pressure to force regime change. American rhetoric is bold. "We stand with the Venezuelan people," says the White House, invoking moral authority and the duty to shape the world. China, in contrast, champions non-interference and economic engagement, investing billions in Venezuela's infrastructure and oil. Beijing's message: we oppose foreign intervention. Dialogue is the only path. These are not just words. They reflect two fundamentally different theories of power. The US leads with alliances and force. China builds influence through trade and development, offering partnership without political strings. As US warships deploy, China talks trade and stability, quietly accruing soft power. Every nation uneasy with US intervention indirectly validates China's approach. America plays checkers, focused on immediate gains. China plays Go, encircling its rival with patient moves. The Venezuelan crisis starkly exposes these competing playbooks. US military intervention in Latin America is nothing new. From Panama to Iraq, these actions have left a legacy of skepticism and instability. For many, the move in Venezuela is just another chapter in a long story of US interference, regardless of stated intentions. Even genuine humanitarian motives are viewed through a lens of mistrust, haunted by the ghosts of past interventions. China's record is the opposite. Since the Korean War, it has largely avoided military adventures, instead championing sovereignty and non-interference. Its engagement is economic, not military, a deliberate, strategic choice. This gives China credibility when it calls for respect for sovereignty in Venezuela. The world now faces a choice: American coercion or Chinese partnership. For many, China's narrative of respectful engagement is increasingly persuasive. In today's world, perception is power. Images of US military might in Venezuela reinforce the narrative of America as an imperial force, playing into the hands of Chinese and Russian critics. China, meanwhile, cultivates the image of a benign partner, building, investing, not invading. This contrast is powerful, even if China's loans come with their own strings. The US intervention hands China a potent tool. When criticized for its own abuses, Beijing can point to Venezuela and accuse Washington of hypocrisy. The moral high ground slips away from the US, making it harder to rally global support. China wins the perception game simply by standing still, as America's actions do the talking. The longer the crisis drags on, the more the world sees China as a force for stability, and the US as a disruptor. Some argue the US intervenes in Venezuela to secure oil, but this is a myth. Venezuela's oil industry is in ruins, requiring years and billions to revive. China, not the US, is the main beneficiary, having loaned billions to Venezuela in exchange for future oil shipments. Any new government must negotiate with Beijing, which holds a powerful economic lien. The US is now a net oil exporter. The strategic need for Venezuelan oil is outdated. For China, securing oil is vital, and a stable Venezuela helps fulfill its energy needs. Ironically, US intervention may end up protecting China's investments, as a stable government would repay Beijing. China could strengthen its energy security without firing a shot, while the US bears the costs. The real winner in the oil game may not be the one sending in troops. US power has always relied on strong alliances, but unilateral action in Venezuela strains these bonds. European allies urge diplomacy, not force, and even close partners like Canada distance themselves from military intervention. This rift weakens the Western alliance, giving China an opening to exploit divisions. In Asia, US partners now question Washington's judgment and reliability, hedging their bets with China. America's focus on its own hemisphere undermines its credibility as a global security provider. China, offering economic deals without military entanglements, appears more predictable and appealing. The transactional nature of China's partnerships is gaining traction in a world wary of conflict. The Venezuela crisis is a strategic gift to Beijing, weakening the bloc that once countered its ambitions. Doubts about US leadership are pushing nations closer to China. The US intervention in Venezuela, lacking UN approval, undermines the very international order America helped build. This erodes the authority of global institutions, creating a vacuum China is eager to fill. China now leads several UN agencies, shaping agendas from within while presenting itself as the defender of multilateralism. At the UN, China invokes the Charter and international law, casting the US as a revisionist power. This role reversal is striking. America, once the architect of the liberal order, now appears impatient with its constraints. China uses the language of rules to constrain US power and win support from developing nations. The result is a slow realignment, more countries siding with China in global forums. The US finds itself increasingly isolated, while China builds coalitions within the system. The Venezuela intervention has accelerated this shift, weakening America's institutional influence. The global order is quietly tilting toward Beijing. Military interventions are costly. Trillions spent in Iraq and Afghanistan and Venezuela will add billions more. These resources could fund domestic priorities or strategic investments, but instead, they're diverted to war. Meanwhile, China invests in global infrastructure, expanding its influence through the Belt and Road Initiative. Every dollar America spends on conflict is a dollar not spent competing with China's economic strategy. As the US imposes sanctions, China steps in as Venezuela's economic partner, buying assets at a discount. In post-conflict reconstruction, Chinese firms are poised to win major contracts. The US may win the war, but China could win the peace. Profiting from stability, America pays to create. The intervention is a self-inflicted economic wound, benefiting America's chief rival. The US intervention in Venezuela may be remembered less for its outcome there than for its impact on global power. By committing to a costly conflict, America creates a strategic vacuum elsewhere, one China is ready to fill. This isn't a dramatic collapse, but a slow, steady shift in influence. The US pursues confrontation and intervention, alienating allies and emboldening rivals. China builds partnerships and soft power through economic integration and non-interference. The Venezuelan crisis highlights these diverging models, making China's approach more attractive to much of the world. The consequences will unfold in small, telling shifts: lost votes at the UN, new trade deals, and growing Chinese presence in America's backyard. The real outcome may be a subtle but undeniable decline in US influence. By focusing on a regional crisis, America cedes the global field to its main competitor. The world isn't becoming Chinese, but it is becoming less American, and Venezuela is accelerating that change.